The intro cutscene to Baldur's Gate 2 has a big job to do, recapping the previous game and giving context for this one. In the first game, our character is a young adult in the closed scholar community of Candlekeep. We are under the wardship of a powerful wizard named Gorion, and so far have led a rather uneventful life. One night, suddenly, Gorion has demanded that the player character leave Candlekeep at once. Unfortunately, you are accosted by a man named Savrok. He kills Gorion, with you barely making it out with your life. Later on in BG1, you learn that Savrok was your brother, you both being Ballspawn. There was a point in history where gods were made flesh and forced to walk the earth, known as the Time of Troubles. And during this time, Ball, the Lord of Murder, foresaw his own death. He went and had himself a whole minecart full of demon babies in an attempt to refuel his rebirth in the future. Savrok, basically playing as the evil main character in his own RPG, raises an army and sows dissent in Baldur's Gate in hopes of instigating a war that will cause so much murder that he himself will become the new Lord of Murder. Your player character, who I'll now mostly refer to as the Ballspawn, manages to stop Savrok's plans and send him back down to hell. A lot of people wonder whether they need to play BG1 before they play BG2, and I'd say probably not, but it is better if you do. I found myself more invested in the world and the characters of BG2, having endeared BG1, but not a lot carries over from your save file. In fact, I'm pretty sure it's only your stats and your levels that come with you, while choices you made from the previous game are left for you to define as they are referenced in dialogues. With Savrok dead, you are now crowned the hero of Baldur's Gate, but the question of your parenthood still sullies your good name. Soon after, your character leaves to wander, but is eventually captured in the night by unknown forces. You awaken in a jail cell surrounded by torture instruments, creatures in jars and corpses still in cages. The last thing we see in the cutscene is a male teleporting at us at odd speed with weird eyes. This is our villain, Jon Irenicus. Next up, we've got the character creation. This can seem daunting at first, but as long as you have some vague idea of the character you want to play, you'll be okay. You can absolutely power game in Baldur's Gate 2, but it also isn't necessary. The party members you get along the way can certainly make up for your Ballspawn shortcomings, and there is no encounter that some creative thinking can't solve. You'll choose a class, alignment, some skills, and begin the tedious process of rolling for stats. I had a friend tell me that you want at least 90 stats or more. You probably don't need that many, but it's just nice to have. Know that I spent over 20 minutes rolling to get the stats of 93, so just be wary of that. I'm sure there's a character editor or something I could have used to make this process quicker, but I mean, that's cheating, and I know I'm a stubborn fool. Our first scene in the game is with Jon Irenicus. We are in a cell and he is torturing us with magic, trying to unlock our potential. We get a few flashes of this until a golem comes into the room, informing Jon that the intruders are making their way deeper into the compound.
Do you even realize your potential?
More intruders have entered the complex, Master.
They act sooner than we had anticipated. No matter, they will only prove a slight delay.
Wake up! Come on! We have to get out of here!
They leave to investigate, and in the next scene a woman busts through the door and manages to open our cell. This is our adopted sister Imoen, who must have been with us at time of capture. Or, yeah, maybe she wasn't. Maybe we were captured separately. The gap between BG1 and BG2 is notoriously unclear. Beamdog attempts to link the two games with their expansion, The Siege of Dragonspear, but personally I didn't feel like I needed that explanation. As decisions and relationships made in Baldur's Gate 1 aren't reflected here in the sequel, when we begin talking to Imoen, the game gives us a few ways to reply. We can show familiarity or play the amnesiac angle. This is clever as it gives the player the option on how much exposition they want upon meeting characters from the first game. Nearby are another 3 characters from Baldur's Gate 1, who are locked in cells. Minx, Jaheira, and Boo. Minx is a simple yet powerful warrior who is accompanied by his hamster, Boo. Minx claims that Boo is a powerful hamster with wisdom beyond that of the gods. There is no key to either cage, so our first task is to free these two. We free Minx by doing a little dialogue puzzle. We must enrage him by saying mean things to him, unleashing his berserker strength that he then uses to break open the bars.
The bars, they bend and twist with my berserker strength. Minsk and Boo are free. No, you will not. No. Ooh. Oh, you are a smart one. I understand now. You said what you did just to get me mad. Mad enough to break free. Haha. You are as smart as Boo sometimes.
We find Jaheira as well, but she doesn't have the combined strength of Minx and Boo. She thinks that Irenicus has done something with her husband Khalid, who was a party member in BG1. So far a lot of bad things are happening to our former buddies, it seems. Imoen mentions that there is some equipment in a nearby room, so that's our next stop. We find a jailer golem who will only take orders from the Master. He doesn't have much interest in restraining you though, so you are free to grab some equipment and the key to Jaheira's cell, which is in a nearby chest. We free Jaheira and then we run a touch south and find a room with a method and a machine shooting electricity bolts. This is teaching us that the answer to some problems may be found by having a close examination of the area that you're in, as some interactables aren't highlighted while holding tab. Combat in Baldur's Gate is a little hard to nail. It's an RPG that plays almost like a persistent real-time strategy campaign. Instead of controlling armies though, you're controlling a small group of hero-type characters which are stronger than 100 men combined, each with their own stats and abilities. The RPG aspects come in with how you build your party and your character themselves. A turn in Baldur's Gate 2 lasts for 3 seconds, and they're all done simultaneously. Combat encounters are often over quickly, as combat is usually resolved after just a couple of turns. This can be overwhelming at times, but you're able to manually pause the game and assess the situation, as well as set up auto pauses. In this moment, it really struck home to me how much DNA this has in common with Knights of the Old Republic, which I first played when I was like 10 years old. Baldur's Gate 2 may have just been a few years before my time, as I didn't get into PC gaming proper until my mid-teens. Past this, we enter this crystal cave type room and are greeted by Genie Attica, which I now realise is a reference to the Attica prison riots, which isn't too unlike the situation going on around us now. The first time I played this, I didn't even notice, as my eyes generally will just glance over names when the creatures are not of this plane. I wondered to myself what this room's purpose was, if it was just a coincidence or perhaps Jon was drawing power from the area somehow. Going down the path to the left leads us into a pack of goblins, whom of which are weak and easy to take down. We're now going through a set of hallways. One of the first rooms we come across is this eerie room that contains a dozen or so tanks with creatures inside, some dead and some alive. Exploring the room, and we get a common message upon clicking the tanks that we need to power them up to speak to the creatures inside. At this point, I decide it's a good time for the party to take a long rest, and upon awakening, Imoen remarks upon my bravery to sleep in such a place. She is used to sleeping with one eye open, and if we want, we are able to get a few more details about our foster father Gorion. He was a great mage and friend to the Harpers, which explains how he's connected to Jaheira. I tell her to move on and focus on the task at hand, but she reminds us that whoever captured us probably won't make it easy for us to escape. Down the hall, we find a sewage golem who can open the door we need to escape, but it refuses to do any work until we find its activation stone. Moving further down, we find another 2 golems standing around doing nothing. Lazy yonks. You are able to kill them now and get some easy XP, but they will pop up later if you leave them. Apparently, the activation stone has been left on this Ryalev character. I somehow walked right past his room and started exploring deeper. And kill a few more gobos and come to this library room, which is a more open encounter to anything we've done so far. Using AoEs is tricky in Baldur's Gate, as from what it seems to me, 2nd edition D&D accounts for low-level magic being imprecise. This means for a lot of spells you want to make sure you've either got the right protections up for your frontline, or you use AoEs as more of an opening gambit. In the next room we find a couple of Dwager, dwarves that hail from the Underdark. They say something about not failing the master, and Imoen says that she read something about the Dwager while in Candlekeep, that they're just evil dwarves. One of them is holding some acorns, which is needed for a quest later. Moving on, we find a locked door, and we still haven't come across this Ryalev fellow. Past the dwarves is this weird magic machine thingy holding a cambion which is protected by a magical shield. Well, if you pull the lever at the center of the machine, it'll unleash the creature. According to the wiki, a cambion is a general term used to refer to half-fiends. It is more powerful than anything we've come across so far, but if you have all the party members available, it's a very doable fight. At this point I realise that I still haven't found Ryalev, and that I have no more doors left to go through. Except for the one right next to the room of the golem who requires the activation stone. In this room we see another one of the glass tanks from the previous room, this one containing Ryalev. Ryalev is a pathetic creature being kept alive by Irenicus in this life support tank. He is tortured, unaware if he is alive or dead, and the only thing he is sure of is that the master has abandoned him.
Who be ye, servants of the master? Release, yes, master, I no longer wish to come back.
We do the merciful thing and end his life, taking the power cell from his tank, which we can then use to go get more information from the creatures in the previous room. They're all in a similar state, suffering and abandoned. I never really got to the bottom of why Jon keeps these creatures. With the activation stone in hand, we go back to the golem who opens up the way for us. We fight a creature known as an Otya who will drop another key. It is around this point that Imoen will start to have her memories of her time in Irenicus' captivity. She recalls him saying that he wants to tease out her power so that it may be used. Past the Otya, we unlock another door, which has us entering the Master's bedchambers. This room is riddled with traps, so you want to get Imoen to scout ahead. It also has a few chests to unlock. Baldur's Gate 2 is packed to the brim with locked doors, chests, and booby traps, so this is the game trying to teach us that having a thief around is essential. In this room, we find a pretty good helmet and a wind statue, which will be a key for a door later. There are 2 doorways out of the room, one of which leads to a portal which is currently inaccessible, and the other to this beautiful, completely out-of-place dryad grove. We find 3 dryads here that claim Irenicus has been keeping them there in an attempt to reignite his ability to feel, as he is no longer able. They say they are from a grove in southern Windsphere Hills, and ask us to deliver the acorns found on Illic the Dwager. If the seeds are planted, then they will be able to teleport to the sprout, escaping Irenicus' dungeon. This will be a quest that we will be able to finish much later, so make sure you don't lose your nuts. Amongst the grove is a beautifully decorated room, also filled with traps and locked chests. Upon entering, Imoen has another flashback where she remembers that Jon built this room to remember her, but his emotions left him a long time ago. It's becoming clearer and clearer that Imoen has suffered a great deal of torture at the hands of Irenicus, more so than our ballspawn. We find another key here and some goodies. As we entered, we set off an alarm, so if we didn't kill the 2 golems from earlier, they will now turn up to fight us. I do some backtracking to unlock a door from earlier and use the wind statue item to activate the portal. This takes us to some kind of wind realm, with the level feeling like I'm on a blimp. We mop up some enemies and find a genie's flask that we of course rub upon. The genie has been kept here by Irenicus and needs us to free him by finding the sister flask to this one and returning it to the genie. He is unclear with his directions, telling us that the master has it, or maybe a golem, or maybe the dryads. Well, he said dryads last, so I'm going with the dryads. As it turns out, the dryads did have the flask, so we backtrack back to the genie and set him free. He gives us a Sword of Chaos +2, which is a great early game weapon for a fighter character. At this point, I feel like I've turned most stones here and return back to the area we were caged in and activate the portal to the next area. Upon entering the next map, we are approached by a man named Yoshimo, who claims he is also a victim here. I don't really question his motives, as until I have a full party, I'll take all the help I can get. Yoshimo is a bounty hunter class, but I mainly use him to pepper arrows and occasionally get in melee. More than anything, he has thief skills, which will come in handy just in case, anything happens to Imoen. The room ahead contains several portals, which are spawning methods, introducing the idea that the key to some fights may be found in the environment. After they are cleared out, Jaheira sees a man's body on a table.
No. This is an illusion, a dream. A bad dream. Where are the mirrors, the switches to pull to show where he's hidden?
It is her husband, Khalid. The party members offer her condolences, but she's in no state to hear any of it, lashing out at Imoen pretty hard, claiming that a child couldn't know her pain.
Ira, I want to say how sorry I am about Khalid. I know this is hard.
No! You do not know. This is not the time for this conversation, child.
Jaheira is an elf harper, and kind of like a cop-type character. She is stern, but in her grief forgets that Imoen has travelled with us for a long time, and regardless of what age you are, this party has seen some shit. In fact, Irenicus made Imoen watch as he killed Khalid himself, perhaps trying to get a reaction out of her, or perhaps just to torture. As we've been exploring this lower level, we've been picking up these wand keys, which will be very handy to have in the next room. In this hallway, we begin to learn a bit more about what is happening around us. In this room are a series of traps which you can use the wand keys to disable the trap and then turn the keys into a usable wand. I completely missed out on this my first playthrough of the game, so don't make the same mistake. We find a room with the glass stasis tanks and what appears to be all the same women inside them. Irenicus is trying to clone someone or something, and one of them has escaped its tube and is fighting one of the invading shadow thieves. Speaking of shadow thieves, we find one who initiates dialogue with us, who tells us that he will not let Jon Irenicus' guild war go on for any longer. At this point, we don't really know much about the shadow thieves, or what the guild war is. All that is really important to understand right now is that whatever Jon plans are, they have got the attention of a powerful group. We find a jolly bartender named Frenadan who needs freeing. There's some cool loot in this room, so it's worth helping him out, even though I can't remember what actually happened to him in the end. As this dungeon has gone along, my character has leveled up once or twice. As a mage, I get XP for every scroll I memorize to my spellbook, which has been a nice little bonus. In BG2, mages learn spells by memorizing scrolls. I'm not sure if there are any abilities that they also learn innately, but 2nd edition D&D, that has some weird rules. We bump into a group of shadow thieves and vampires fighting, which is giving us some subtle hints on who the other guild might be comprised of. I go around to do one final mop-up of the area, and come across a smelting room with more Dwager. I'm not sure if this room has a greater purpose, but in this dungeon we've come across goblins, demons, genies, Dwager, dryads, clones, golems, vampires, and an Otya. Clearly, Irenicus has some friends. The way out is littered with corpses. I'm not too sure how they got there, but I won't be dying today. It's time to leave the Irenicus dungeon and find out where we are and how we got here. Spoilers, we're not in Baldur's Gate anymore, baby.
The tunnel slopes upward into the welcome glare of daylight. Such is your relief that you barely notice the debris at your feet. The remnants of a battle fought only moments before. Surveying the carnage, you hear a scream of rage, and a massive explosion collapses the passage behind you. The sounds of combat greet you as you struggle to your feet. The fight, it seems, is still going strong.
Thanks everyone for watching, and please let me know what you thought of this one. It's a new format for me and I would like to make it as awesome as possible. Have a good one.